Hello, coin traders. How we doing? Thanks for joining me for another show looking at Internet Computer ICP on that ticker. That's right. Show us your ICP-ness for the max. Anyway, right now, after a very nice, strong upside, little bit of conflicting signals on some of the shorter term charts. So do want to actually flip into those first. So looking at the 1 hour specifically, because we're looking at a very big resistance point topping out with the bulls unable to break and hold a close above this big resistance line at about 1537. So despite having rejected from this level multiple times here, we know that we're also starting to set higher lows. So that does kind of have us setting up in a little bit of an ascending triangle. But the thing is that this isn't necessarily the best looking setup right now. And what I mean by that, especially after we've gotten almost a full bearish cross here in a formation and setup on this hourly chart. So if we actually go ahead and invert this chart, and to do this on TradingView, all you have to do is hit the Alt-I key, and you can actually invert this key, right? So this is the normal chart setup. Then if we want to actually flip it, kind of get a different perspective, which is why we like doing it. And as you can see right now, after having a very nice support, or excuse me, a resistance, obviously in the inverted chart, and despite breaking it several times, we actually still maintained an overall bullish setup here for these exponential moving averages on this 1 hour. Now, right now, we're actually looking at that flipping, especially after having the prices rally on top of these exponential moving averages. And this flip actually does signal a little bit more pressure to the upside because the path of least resistance, especially if it does hold, does provide a lot more of that point to bounce off of. And because we are inverted, this would be a support point. So if we go back to the original, you can see how on the short-term trend, we're looking at getting stuck up at this point as a resistance. So in all these other instances, we did break below the 50 period, but quickly reclaimed it. Dip below, reclaimed, dip below, reclaimed, maintained exponential moving average support in a bullish setup. So right now, starting to lose that and haven't necessarily been able to reclaim it that soon. So if we actually can see the bulls reclaim these exponential moving averages on this 1 hour chart, then we would be looking at actually continuing an uptrend and seeing a path towards the resistance point right now at 15,378. But if that doesn't happen, then we will be looking at putting in a lower high and then realistically lower lows and trying to hold support on all these previous lows. So the low of support that we are going to be looking at is a close down to about 14.24. So about 14 and a quarter. We're going to really need to see this hold. And as you can see, the last two attempts of it, Bulls did a good job defending this level and holding an hourly close on top of that level. Now, so if I want to actually flip over into the 4 hour chart here too, looking at very nice support, specifically right now, we are going to be looking at support coming in along this 26 period EMA. So very nice support here in between the 12 and on top of 26. And right now we have gotten multiple tests and attempts of the bears to push prices lower, but the bulls have been defending this 26 period EMA very nicely. So this is going to be a big signal as well. So if we do see the bears push prices down and hold a close below this 26 period EMA, then that's just going to be an extremely bearish sign. And one of those things that then we'll look down to see whether or not we can maintain support in this zone between the 26 and the 50, like we've seen in multiple times here before we've run up to the current trend high in this instance. So same sort of thing here. If we actually go ahead and invert this chart setup here on the 4 hour, you can kind of see how we're actually still more or less in a bearish setup just because we are getting stuck up and the path of least resistance now is to the downside. So for the bulls, this is actually a good sign because remember, this is inverted. So what we actually would need to see for the bears in this instance would actually be that break of this 26 period exponential moving average and then a big bearish flip. So that would be the setup and scenario for the bears to take over, because when we do invert it back to the regular, that is the bearish scenario and setup. So as long as we do still see the bulls maintain what we actually are looking at here, and especially maintaining the support and preventing that support from breaking, that's going to be a very nice upside signal to actually see prices continue towards this big resistance point and continue to play out this ascending triangle like we have been looking at. So nothing is guaranteed, but just remember, the more times we do hammer on a level, the more it does tend to want to break towards that direction. So if we can see the bulls just keep hammering, maintaining higher support, eventually we will see this 1538 resistance break. And one of the things about this level is that if we go ahead and flip over into the 2-day chart, for example, we can see just how this level lines with where we're looking at for the previous chart setup. So on the initial move here back in the start of the year, we were looking at these levels being very relevant in a big zone here that all these prices got stuck up at. So resistance, hit resistance, got stuck up, resistance, finally pushed through to hit our trend high where we were looking at prices coming in at almost $21, then pretty much just immediately broke it and then saw it as resistance once again here. So now after this big long accumulation period, seeing the bulls on this very strong and powerful move to the upside be back at this resistance zone is another good sign, but it's not necessarily guaranteed that we're going to see the bulls actually break it, just because right now we have had so much upside without really much period of a cool down. But the good thing is that if we actually go ahead and make another support line here for what we were looking at on the spring cycle earlier, then where we found a lot of these supports where we finally broke it should have been a little bit more resistive. Now, if we look in on this 2-day chart, you can see that over the course of 3 candles, we did see levels of closing resistance get stuck up here just below 12. And ultimately, once we did see this nice candle print a close with a lot of these nice lower downside shadows showing a lot of that buying, the signal was very clear that we were going to see a lot farther upside gains and movements just based on the strength and blowing through this big, strong resistive zone. So right now, the bearish case, if we do lose shorter term support and we do see a little bit more of a pullback, we would actually be looking at a very nice support pretty much coming in right along this 1176, which would allow these exponential moving averages on this longer term to catch up, providing that very nice downside guide, and I would expect a very solid defense from the bulls of these levels in that instance. Now, I think just based off of historical patterns too, it's very plausible that we could see a continuation. So for example, if we look at the move in the middle of December last year, we saw a huge, nice explosion, sideways consolidation, very nice flag pattern, and then a continuation before we actually did get stuck up at these 2-day exponential moving averages for the 12 period before hitting this next leg up, pulling back, finding that support, and then being on our way once again to the trend high. Moving into the daily chart here, I want to talk about the candles that just recently closed because we're looking at a red, green, red. But the thing about it is the bullish candle actually completely engulfs both of the bearish ones. So one green candle effectively knocks out 2 bearish days. So very strong move, especially with a lot of this nice, strong upside gains, showing a very strong defense from the bulls and continuing to prove that we're not necessarily out of steam yet, just based off of how strong this move to the upside is and how much the downside sell-offs have been a little bit more defended. Now, checking out the weekly chart here, a lot of great things about it. Specifically, just want to look at this big resistance zone like we were talking about, because if we go ahead and look at this, this is a big point of resistance here on this move, as well as a big point of support. So because we actually had some sideways price chop action here back from February of 2022 until about April of 2022, pretty big period to confirm this as a technical level. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we saw a lot of resistance up overhead when we have seen prices at that point. So not unreasonable to think that that could still be a very big potential for some resistance here overhead without some major incoming bullish volume. But with that said, we also know that once we do see a price break, and let's go ahead and clear this up a little bit. Once we do see a very nice big price break on top of this zone, we would expect it to actually maintain a little bit more of that support, kind of like what we didn't see in the last instance, but we were dealing with a lot of bearish pullback across the rest of crypto space as well. So the fact that now we're in this nice confirmed uptrend on a lot of cryptos, and especially with a lot of altcoins now hitting all-time highs, very good reason and scenario and potential setup to actually see this very nice accumulation, see that phase E and a very nice breakout after this period of accumulation, as well as this big longer period of accumulation coming off of the 2022 pullback. But now, in addition to that, zooming in here closer on the weekly, very nice bullish cross here and setup in formation right now for the weekly exponential moving averages. So very good sign here indeed, especially after having a nice bullish flip and actually seeing a little bit more of that resistance play out after failing to hold these EMAs as support. But that was just a fake out. We actually did find a lot of great lower downside support. And because the gap on these EMAs didn't necessarily get that big on the downside, that actually does show a lot of strength from the bulls, especially maintaining this very nice trend line here that we were finding as support. So consistently found higher lows until eventually we did find this very nice break, confirming the candle as both resistance as well as backtesting support, and now being in a nice bullish setup. So if we do see a back test to confirm this bullish setup as support, not the worst sign, but like we said, we could experience something similar of kind of just some sideways patterns in trading, especially as long as we do maintain support on top of 1176, allowing the exponential moving averages to roll up. I could see that being a very realistic scenario, kind of like what we experienced. Hopefully not as long of a drawn out flat sideways period of trading with just a lot of chop, but hopefully we would actually see a back test and then a continuation as well, as we do get very, very bullish on this upcoming cycle. Now, it's really hard to argue with any of the fundamentals and the tech behind internet computers, so I think this chart shaping up very nicely is going to be playing off very nicely as well, with a strong technological narrative and a lot of use cases and projects that are growing and going to be found using ICP as a very great blockchain. But like we said, a lot of what happens is going to be coming down to what happens on the shorter term chart and how we actually hold or break this trend. So if we do see a little bit of a flippening and we do see some lower lows with this 1424 support breaking, that's going to confirm that the top for the longer term anyway, or the daily and longer, are actually coming in, and we will be looking at a little bit more of that downside pullback here and a little bit more of that support being found to confirm and backtest some of those previous resistances now as that support, which is exactly what we want to see in very strong, nice market setups. But overall, I think a lot of great potential and exciting to see great things for ICP Internet Computer. I wouldn't be surprised to see this hitting in the triple digits at all, over 100. But obviously, those are Moonboy predictions here, but wouldn't be surprised to actually end up seeing that just based off of how big the market cap would be and the potential and kind of where I ultimately see ICP going. But obviously, no one ever knows, and this is not financial advice, but just some speculation based off of potential and what I've seen out of markets so far. But with that, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today on Internet Computer ICP on that ticker. If you did enjoy the show, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe button if you have not done so just yet. And as always, post all those questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that fun stuff in the comment sections below or over on Twitter at @coin_trades is the handle over there. Do appreciate you watching this far, and do appreciate all the continued love and support as well. It does mean so much. That's going to do it for now, though, so stay safe, take care, coin traders, and I'll catch you back in the next video.